In Pokemon's third iteration of games, the absolutely legendary Gen 3, there exists a place completely unlike any other in the entire series, yet it would seem completely the opposite at a simple glance. With a location on 6th Island in Fire Red and Leaf Green, and another on Route 103 in Emerald, Altering Cave is extremely unsuspecting, almost painfully so, and in the average playthrough can easily be passed over as a dead-end road with nothing to offer outside of a seemingly infinite supply of wild Zubats. It's not the most tantalizing prize in the world. Zubat is arguably the most common sight in this generation of games. So a cave exclusively dedicated to them isn't going to distinguish itself against the rest of this world. But the very premise itself is what's so inviting. What does it all mean? Altering Cave. What could possibly warrant that title? Does the cave alter in some way I'm not yet privy to? Or does the cave perhaps even alter us? Whoa, real talk. As a child, I was infinitely fascinated by this location. I was absolutely certain there was some piece of the game I just hadn't solved yet as I searched every nook and cranny of this little hideaway. There must be some secret to it. The name is too evocative. The positioning and details within the cave are a little bit too particular. What could it possibly mean? I personally assumed that the cave would physically change shape in some way to reveal maybe a larger dungeon or treasure of some sort, but I never figured it out. From that lens, really no one ever did. Altering Cave is a living artifact. It had an intended purpose with a mystery gift distribution that would change the Zubat encounter into one from a list of various Johto Pokemon, but the event never ran in any region. The potential whereabouts of the actual situation being surmised through a combination of game data and other events that actually ran. Altering Cave, however, was effectively dead on arrival. But unlike the usual for a deprecated Pokemon event, and to a certain degree lost media fixtures as a whole, we are left with this permanent but dead launching ground. The cave continues to exist as a place you can visit and explore in any run of the 3 games it's mapped in, even to this day. In this inert form, there are technically still things to do here. As stated previously, there are wild Zubat with a 100% encounter chance. This artifact is still alive, even while still unable to fulfill its original purpose. It's like an ancient library, with all its original knowledge destroyed, but with newfound meaning in the structure itself. Maybe that's a little grandstandy of me, but for real, so much meaning has been and can be made of the cave in the form it continues to exist in. Guaranteed Zubat is actually a pretty utilitarian thing, it turns out, in the right hands at least. It definitely wouldn't make the cut in newer games with all the quality of life improvements that have been made for competitive grinding, but in the days of Gen 3, this was an actual gift. Zubat drops 1 speed EV on Knockout, and it makes Altering Cave a perfect place for grinding the stat. Grinding for stats like this is a gigantic chore in these older generations, but places with guaranteed pools like this at least make the process straightforward and borderline automated. And so many Pokemon are going to need these points in speed. Set them up with a Macho Brace, maybe even Pokerust if you've got it, and you've got a speed machine getting an entire stat point on each KO. Grinding for stats and going for particulars like this obviously isn't for everyone, and even less so going to be a part of every playthrough. It's going to be of the most use for those players grinding the battle frontier and maybe even the rare Gen 3 trainer doing battle on physical hardware. This stuff is fun, but a lot of work. I most recently came here to grind up speed for a Battle Frontier Sceptile and Lanoon, both of whom were featured in a previous video, so you can technically see the fruits of this labor firsthand. Switching to the other side of potential use cases, the 100% encounter chance makes this the perfect place to shiny hunt Zubat if you're specifically interested in the Zubat line. Again, Zubat is incredibly common and easy to wrangle in this generation, and it hits encounter chances as high as 80% in Meteor Falls, and even a fascinating 69% in Mount Moon. But in no place other than here does it have the absolute 100% guarantee, so it ends up becoming the place for Zubat despite its original intention seemingly as a placeholder for bigger and better things. Random encounter shiny hunts obviously aren't complicated, you kind of just run back and forth, but if you have a specific target in mind, this is the absolute best case scenario with no other Pokemon to distract or face on. And so presumably, the offerings of this cave will deliver the Zubat you seek as painlessly as possible for a retro shiny hunt. These are specific and intentional use cases. In no way am I claiming that this is some ultra-functional hub or key location in these worlds. I, and presumably anyone else, do not just hang out here. If you somehow do, please leave a fascinating comment as to why that's the case. But the cave works like any other dedicated place of service. I would probably only set foot in a laundromat to do laundry, and similarly, only set foot in Altering Cave to engage in these specific Zubat operations. But the cave is so fascinating because these are subsequent use cases of its original function remaining unfulfilled. The ruins of a past civilization have left us with this ghost town, one that in its very name itself was dedicated to changing, but is to remain frozen in this pre-metamorphic state for the rest of time. This resultant shape and function is something we can really only experience this way in the interactive art medium that is video games. In any other story or art piece, if some facet like this was going to be cut out of a story, it would just get cut entirely. Pieces or memories of it might remain in some other context of design, but we wouldn't be able to freely interact with floating and half-built structures like we can in this cave. I call it the ruins of a past civilization, but perhaps it would be more apt to describe it as the ruins of an unfinished civilization. This place is half-built and only partially finished, and now we're able to play in its remains. We get to make meaning of it and interact with it even in this weird form, and now it is a new place all of its own. That's the difference. That's why this place is so special. We aren't supposed to be here, at least like this. But through ingenuity and creativity, we can be in a whole new way. The last and probably coolest thing about Altering Cave is that it can still be technically used in its full functionality. No, this is not a "I haven't been completely honest with you" video essay moment. The event that would activate the cave never ran and never will, barring some potential future weirdness with the Fire Red Leaf Green Switch release. But the mechanics and dialogue still exist on the cart and can be artificially activated through event injection. This is a very different type of use case than the two previously mentioned, but through the work done by the community, you can still experience something of what the cave originally had to offer, albeit technically illegitimately. A touch of dialogue about checking the cave, and you're off to the races with one of 8 Johto Pokemon, with whatever gets chosen being effectively substituted over the Zubat and retaining its 100% encounter chance. Not to mention all the additional functionality squeezed out of Zubat working for each Pokemon swapped in with their respective stats and shiny hunts. Presumably, the mystery gift would have been activated multiple times to swap between the species and ultimately catch them all. If well implemented, this could be a pretty awesome distribution process. But just looking at the Pokemon themselves can shed a little light on how this event might have fallen flat and was ultimately shelved entirely. While all Johto Pokemon not directly native to either region present in Gen 3, all 8 of these creatures can be rounded up on the GameCube or in bonus areas added to Emerald, making them relatively easy pickups in regular gameplay and perhaps diminishing the hype a little for something like this. It's not like Deoxys, where the Pokédex is concretely missing an entire entry that was kept in a time event that is now 20 years past expiration. It would have just been an extra little cherry on top for an additional splash of novelty on the average playthrough. It's weird that the location remains intact, but it didn't really need to run. But alternatively, could I posit that I do not care and it would have been awesome as hell if it did? It's really no concern to me that I can also catch Mareep in the Emerald Safari Zone extension in the hypothetical world where I can also have a cave absolutely full of the little thing. In fact, that sounds extremely ideal. Added additional novelty and borderline pointless fanfare are actually the things that I want most in any game, and not just Pokemon either. Little bells and whistles like this make a world even more perfect to play in and live inside, and I am surrounded by beauty when a game features the just because. So I would say that all of this is important, but just in a different way. Yes, the Pokédex benchmarks for Gen 3 are safe and sound with or without the cave's complete implementation. We could maybe call that classical or mechanical importance. Absolutely essential to the function of a game, of course. This is a skeleton that makes everything work at the base level of play. But beyond that, we have these things of experiential importance. Arguably just as essential, these are the game components that make us feel and emote as we actually engage with the medium as people. And what an absolutely fascinating one this cave is, regardless of whether or not it works as intended. And so yeah, it should come as no surprise at this point that I think Altering Cave is extremely awesome. Especially so even in the unfinished form with the Cave of Zubats. It became something more in the hands of players who were ultimately allowed to experience it. No longer just a location on a map in a video game, this is now a living and breathing place. We can live here. And how cool that it has the twist of technically being a dead one resurrected by the hands of crafty trainers. It made me feel something completely unique as a child, entirely unaware unaware of the secrets it actually held. And it made me feel something completely unique as an adult, grimly aware of the planned event's deprecation. There are some places across this series that are ambivalently similar to this place in how everything shook out. Older Pokemon is practically filled to the brim with deprecated and technically lost events like this one. But in the sheer majority of cases, the little event area tied to the distribution could only be accessed once the event was actually activated, like with the Sinjo Ruins or Faraway Island. And in the rare case that it still can be, like with the Pledge Grove in Black 2 and White 2, that is the only possible purpose of the location. Without Keldeo, there is explicitly nothing to do here. And so against these stipulations, Altering Cave stands alone in many ways as a living artifact. This unfinished ghost persists in playthroughs as a place that is both alive and dead. Its original purpose, ancient and unfulfilled, but still in use by a new generation. Even though I am just standing in a cave filled with infinite Zubats, I still must stop and appreciate the experiential significance of this ethereal place. And that's all I got for you this time, folks. As always, thanks for watching. Like the video and subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed it. I'm surrounded by beauty. Droomish out.